The Church of St. John the Baptist, Reedham, with its distinctive checker-patterned exterior, stands in relative isolation some way outside of the modern village above the River Yare. It is an ancient Christian site dating back to the 7th century, but although there is evidence of reused Roman building materials, most of the existing structure dates to the 13th or early 14th century. Reedham was where Margaret Paston's mother's family lived, but the medieval hall has not survived, although the church tower was built in Margaret's lifetime, paid for by a legacy in the will of her uncle Thomas Burney. In a copy of her will, written a couple of years before her death, when she was in her early 60s, Margaret left a bequest for repairs to the Reedham church, specifying that this was where I was born. When Heike and I visited Reedham one quiet Sunday in midsummer, the churchyard was open, but the building itself remained closed. Below the rainbow welcome sign on the door hung another notice, informing us that access was possible only on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Because much of the medieval interior was destroyed by a fire in 1981, the loss was not so very great. We were able to walk along the paths cut through the unmown grass, dense with oxeye daisies, buttercups, Queen Anne's lace and cow parsley, and around the outside of the church, where a gathering of bees clamoured for access through a gap in the stonework high on the south-facing wall. Sitting on a bench, looking across in the direction of the Yare, I enjoyed listening to the chatter of the rooks, almost drowning out the birdsong, and the crowing of a cockerel on a distant farm. I was reminded of the soundscape of my late mother's home in North Yorkshire, where the birds conversed loudly from the rookery high in the trees of the manor house opposite. But I didn't have a strong sense of Margaret's presence, and indeed, without her letters as guidance, it can seem as if her life didn't start with her birth, but began only 2 decades later, when arrangements were being made for her marriage in the spring of 1440 or thereabouts. At that time, the wealthy Norfolk housewife, Agnes Paston, wrote to her husband a brief and somewhat cryptic letter recording the first meeting between 2 young people, Margaret Mortby and their eldest son, John. The term housewife, in modern English housewife, described a woman, usually a wife, responsible for a family and its servants. In the case of Agnes and her husband William, her dominion extended to several manors and estates across Norfolk and extending into Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire and Suffolk. The meeting was important to both Agnes and William, because both families were hoping the 2 would marry. John was not only being given the opportunity to assess his future bride, Agnes was, in effect, interviewing the woman who would become her successor. This is also our first encounter with Margaret, and although it is Agnes who provides this first-hand account, we can choose, if we like, to see Margaret through John's eyes, a strong, perceptive, confident and resourceful young woman who, as she stepped through the doorway and moved her hood back from her eyes, quietly began to assert her authority over the household which she would, in due course, come to control. Agnes liked Margaret. That much is clear from the letter that Agnes wrote to her husband. But in her letter, Agnes doesn't mention Margaret Mortby, as she was then by name. Instead, she refers to her as the gentlewoman whom you know of from Reedham. The marriage arrangements for Agnes and William's son, although apparently progressing as smoothly as might be hoped for, were at a sensitive stage, so discretion, or secrecy, was paramount. A good bride was a precious commodity, and letters could be intercepted or lost and then fall into the wrong hands. It wasn't worth taking unnecessary risks. Agnes reports to William that Margaret addressed her prospective husband kindly and courteously, and said he was truly your son.